What are we going to do with this log? What are we going to do as a people of this nation, as a people of this state, as a people of the state next door where Ferguson is? What are we going to do to heal the psyche, the wounding of not only ourselves, but our brothers and sisters? Where do we start with this wounding so deep that it comes from the Civil War when we enslaved people and sold them? Because their skin was a different color. We sold them like things, separating parents from children. This wound does not heal by snapping one's fingers and saying, God, have mercy. This wound, if we are honest, this mote, this beam that the gospel speaks of, afflicts each of us in this church. If you say you are not prejudiced, think again. If I say I am not prejudiced, I must bite my tongue. It is imprinted in our national story. On the steps of the courthouse, across that river, the courthouse that still stands, the black person was declared not a human being. And yet that human being and his wife Harriet are buried in the Catholic cemetery, Calvary, in the city of St. Louis. You ask me, why are they in that cemetery? Were they Catholic? I have no idea. I doubt it. Perhaps somebody doing history can really uncover the facts for us. But my suspicion, and it is only a suspicion, it's not verified, is that that was the only place they would bury them. They would allow them to be buried. The Dred Scott decision that someone who had a different colored skin was not human haunts us to this day. This psychic wounding of so grievous a wound to a brother or a sister is at the bottom of Ferguson, my dear friends. It's the bottom of Cincinnati. It's the bottom of, you go and name the rest of the cities. We are ill as a people with this wounding. So what are we going to do? What is our part of trying to heal this wound, not only in me, but maybe in my son-in-law, maybe in my daughter? Let me offer a suggestion, and I want to see you nod or shake your head. Have you been created by God? And you shake your head, or you're going to nod your head? What does Scripture say God is? Scripture is very clear. God is love. You have been created out of no thing. We say nothing. Because you were not created out of stuff, a thing. What were you created out of then? You were created out of love. Because you were created by God. Therefore, your nature is love. And when you go against your nature, you feel creepy. You are made for love. So is the brown person. So is the black person. So is the Asian person. So is the American Indian person. They are all going to be sinful, and they are all going to be heroic. And you will have to wait until they show you which is which. If you are created out of love, pure love, out of God, then you only have one simple task, and that is to keep your eyes open so that you do not betray who you are. You're made out of love. And you will know in your heart of hearts when you are violating your very nature. That's what sin is. Sin is when we go against our very nature, for we are made for love. And so at night, when you need to examine your conscience and look over your day, don't get all tense about that. Just stand before a pair of eyes and look at those eyes and ask yourself one question. Where have I really injured my love today? Yes, all the commandments are violations of love. All the laws, all the rules are a violation of love. So look over your day. Run the movie reel. What did you say to that clerk because you were so impatient? Who did you ignore because the skin is a different color, so you didn't welcome them? Who did you cut short in your driving because you had to be first? How did you violate your nature? How did you wound yourself because of your foolish egotism and your egocentricity, your selfish love? How did you wound yourself? You who are made, spun out of love. In the gospel, Jesus says, don't judge. What we have to understand is that he's using a special word. The word in Greek is krino. K-R-I-N-O, krino. And what does that mean? Krino is a negative judgment without any evidence. You have to make a judgment. If somebody is stumbling around and their breath smells like whiskey, you have to make the judgment they might be intoxicated, do you not? You had better. That's not krino. Krino is what Jesus is talking about in the gospel. When you judge your brother or your sister and you do not have interior evidence of their motive at all, you move to a snap judgment and you condemn them. And you wound yourself by violating your love. I'll tell you my own story, how I learned about prejudice. I grew up in the city of Milwaukee. And when I was a little girl, we lived in an integrated neighborhood. And my little brother, who was 2, I was about 14, he was 2. He was out in front of the house and he was playing with all his buddies. Most of them were black, little black children. And my mother came out on the porch and she said, "Dale, come in now, time for lunch." And I stood there and watched with amazement as my 2-year-old brother wiped his hands on his shorts. You know how kids do when they've been playing with trucks and dirt and everything else in the middle of the street, the sidewalk. He wiped his hands on his pants, and then he went around that whole circle and gave every one of those kids a big smooch. And he came in for lunch. And I held my breath. What was my mother going to say? My mother said nothing. She said absolutely nothing. And my heart jumped for joy because my mother was teaching my little baby brother not to be prejudiced. When I was a little bit older, my father was a bus driver. He worked for the transport company. And about in the late 40s, my father and all of the drivers heard that the transport company in Milwaukee was going to integrate. They were a privately owned company and they were being forced to integrate. Our last name starts with S. That's pretty far down in the alphabet. But they had to get down to S before they reached my father, who would consent to train the first black young man that they hired to drive a bus. And when they got to my father, he said, "Of course I'll train him." And the 14 days started. It was a 14-day training period. And at the end of the training period, my father said to Roger Nabeck, that was his name, "Roger, it's my custom when I finish training that you come home and meet the wife and the kids. So we're going to have lunch at my house tomorrow." And Roger Nabeck looked at my father and said to him, "Mr. Streeter, I don't appreciate that kind of humor." And my father looked at Roger Nabeck and said, "Roger, I am not joking. You are coming to my home tomorrow and have lunch with my family." And then my father came home that night and sat us down, my brother and myself. And he said, "Tomorrow at lunch, we are going to have one of my students, Mr. Roger Nabeck, and Roger is black. And we will show him the hospitality and the courtesy we show to any other guest. Is that understood?" And that is how my father taught us not to be prejudiced. But don't kid yourself. And don't fool yourself either. There is still something lurking within each one of us to stay with people who are like us, with people who look like us, with people who talk like us, with people who have even a house like us. So what are we to do? I'm going to suggest some very practical things. The one who has made you out of love has given you all you need to heal yourself, to heal your children and grandchildren, and to begin to heal those with whom you work and those with whom you play and pray. For no one in this church can say that every single relative they have is not prejudiced. You all have stories to tell, don't you? Of who said what and what sneaky joke someone offered that violated their love. And so you're going to have to get your antenna up. You're going to have to intend to notice things. And one by one, you're going to have to take a stand, and you're going to have to say, thank you, but I really don't appreciate those kind of jokes. Thank you. No, that's not the way I look at it. You don't have to act as if you're the grand, prophet or the grand Messiah. You just talk about you. Don't say you just told a joke I don't appreciate. No, I don't appreciate those kind of jokes. Most of all, you are going to have to watch when your own heart flips or when your own stomach tightens, because you're with people very different from you. And you're going to have to do what the Jesuits train us to do. The Jesuits train us to do agere contra. That's their phrase, agere contra. It means when you detect a movement in your heart that is against your love, against your nature, against how you have been made, you are to go directly against that movement. But you gotta notice it first. You gotta notice that you're feeling uncomfortable. You gotta notice. And then you walk over and put your hand out and you say, hello, my name is. It's very small things. Very, very small things. Watch your reaction when you're watching television. Be attentive to what may be trying to infest your love with a toxin that is poisonous. And that poison is prejudice. Above all, be alert that when you receive the King of Kings, who comes to feed you with his own love, to make sure your battery does not run out, that you ask him to give you his heart, so that your heart might be in tune with his heart. For he has created people different, like flowers in a garden. And it is not your place to tell him that you don't like petunias, or you don't like roses, or you don't like lilacs. For people are as different as flowers, and it is in God's intent that the garden be full of very different varieties. And so all of us, from the Pope on down to the humblest child among us, we need to be alert. We need to watch for whatever in the culture is trying to wound our love. Because in wounding our love, it wounds how we are made by a God who is love. And so I set that challenge before you. Receive the Christ, heart to heart. And when you walk from this place, resolve that you will be on your guard for anything that will lessen, infest, or wound the love out of which you are made. We ask for God's mercy. Amen.